What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Will, and I am here to review a new release that I picked up. This is a release from Scream Factory, and it is the 4K of the 2008 film The Strangers. The Strangers. This movie is a movie I haven't seen in quite some time, but I remember loving it when it first came out. This came out in 2008. It's a film directed by, I believe the director's name is Brian Bertino, if I'm not mistaken. So there was a Blu-ray release of this way back in the day. In fact, I'm pretty positive around 2008, 2009, when this Blu-ray first came out. That was pretty sure the format wars were still going on. You know, it was Blu-ray versus HD DVD. I don't know if anybody remembers that whole thing back in the day between Blu-ray and HD DVD. But anyway, the Blu-ray for this at the time, way back in the day, was pretty mediocre. You know, the encode wasn't all that great. But in 2018, from what I'm remembering, Scream Factory put out their version of the Blu-ray. It was a newer scan of the original camera negative, and it was pretty good. You know, it was pretty good. So I'm here to either review the 4K, but I'm going to talk about the movie first. This movie stars Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman as a couple, James and Kristen. And essentially, what happens is they're at this wedding or some kind of party, and they have a disagreement. So it's implied that they get into this fight, and they're staying at this house. Who I believe it's James. It's either his father's house or uh, some house in the family, right? This getaway house that's pretty secluded uh, in this small town, and they're essentially stalked by these home invaders, intruders, known as the Strangers. So when this film originally came out, it got a lot of buzz. In fact, it was probably one of the most popular movies at the time because of the way it was shot, because of the setup, because of the pacing. It was a really well done movie. As far as the story is concerned, it's a pretty straightforward home invasion flick, but it's done really well. Um, I originally was kind of intrigued by the way this movie was shot, specifically regarding or specifically relating to the way it was lit. The lighting in this movie is very low key. It's a very dark film, and not only in terms of the story and how it unfolds, uh, but also the way it's shot. It's very very it's lit very darkly, I should say, which I think adds to the somber tone of the movie. You know, you got this really dark type of cinematography with these tungsten lighting sources that just really look good, and you know, it looked pretty solid on the Blu-ray. With the 4K, looks pretty good. It's a decent upgrade. But speaking of that, let's get into that. Let's get into the visual aspect of The Strangers. So, as I said, this movie originally, it's a very dark movie. Um, the 4K appears to be somewhat enhanced in terms of the black levels. Originally, a lot of that stuff, black levels on Blu-ray transfers, they get to be drowned out. I felt that there was a little bit more detail with the 4K. You can notice uh, just pieces of like fabric on the couch, or you know, strands of hair, the usual like fabric of the type of fabric of the clothing that they're wearing. A lot of that is a little more apparent, which is great. But ultimately, because of the lighting style of this movie, I wouldn't say it's anything that blew me away. Now, is it definitely an upgrade? I think so. I think if you don't own this movie on Blu-ray, it's probably worth picking up, just because the 4K includes a Blu-ray as well. And there's two cuts of this movie. There's a theatrical cut and the unrated cut on this release. But I'm going to be honest, guys, the unrated cut, I think it adds like 2 or 3 minutes of footage, which ultimately doesn't really impact the film all that much. So I watched both. I watched the theatrical and I watched the unrated. There's barely, much of a difference. Again, the footage that's added is kind of spread throughout, and it doesn't impact the way the movie unfolds in any way, shape, or form. You're barely going to notice it because it's between 84 and 87 minutes long, something like that. So not much to say there, but yeah, visually, I've always loved the look of this film personally. I think that the mood that it kind of sets, the cinematography is perfect. In fact, I really love the shots of outside the house because you kind of see this house. It's kind of like a gloomy sepulcher. It's kind of draped uh, in this setting, surrounded by the woods. And what I really like is there's certain shots, especially on the 4K, you can see them pretty well. The trees that exist outside the house, the trees outside the house in the yard and in the surrounding area. It's kind of cool how they look in the low light. You can kind of see some of the details of like the way that the bark is on those trees. And I always love that look. I always loved the look of this movie. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm sure there's going to be a subsection of people out there that aren't the biggest fans of the way this movie is lit because I can see a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's one of those movies where it's so dark that like a lot of stuff is drowned out." I would probably make that argument with the original Blu-ray. The Scream Factory Blu-ray from 2018 was a step up in that regard. But the 4K really does it a little bit of justice here. This is one of those releases where if you already have the 2018 Blu-ray, I wouldn't necessarily recommend picking up this 4K unless you want it on the most upgraded format that there is, which in this case would be the 4K. It's more so, it's not a drastic difference from the Blu-ray. There's a little bit more detail in certain aspects and certain scenes. The contrast is much better, because you have this film that's really a very low lit film, but the light sources tend to be that kind of tungsten style lighting, which on the Blu-ray, that could be problematic at times depending on the transfer. But I think the 4K really balances that out a little better. So consider this the type of release where the original Blu-ray was pretty mediocre. The 2018 Scream Factory Blu-ray was pretty good. I think they did a solid job with that. I'll say it again. This 4K release is not one of those that's going to make you sit back and go, wow, this is such an upgrade. It's not one of those instances. This is not the case with this release. This is more of, somebody going back and kind of fine tuning and tweaking certain aspects of it. So, if you're going to sit there and watch the Blu-ray and then you're going to watch this right afterwards, you'll definitely notice some of those things if you're paying close attention. But ultimately, although it is an upgrade, I don't think it's a deal breaker for me personally, right? Now, I don't have that Blu-ray from 2018 anymore. I got rid of it a long time ago. So for me, the 4K was a no-brainer. And I really do enjoy this movie. Now, the audio is fantastic. The audio is great. I believe this is a DTS 5.1, if I'm not mistaken. But it sounded fantastic on my TV. Yeah, it's a DTS Master Audio 5.1 surround. I loved it, man. The audio is one of the best parts about this movie because there's moments where there's silence, and I think the soundtrack, not the soundtrack, but the score of this movie, when you do have those bits of music, it's very, I would say, like almost like ambient, very distant sounding, like that kind of ambient horror style soundtrack, which is really cool, and really adds to the low key vibe of this movie. Again, it's a little bit of a not so much a slow burn, but much slower paced compared to what we're used to nowadays with movies. So I really enjoy this film, and I think the soundtrack does it justice. I think the 4K transfer does it justice. As far as the extras, I'm going to get into those real quick. Let's just read through what's included in the package itself. So disc one, we get the 4K UHD of the unrated version, which I said it's not much of a difference, guys. 2 or 3 minutes of footage doesn't make or break the viewing, at least for me. Disc two, you get the Blu-ray, which is the theatrical version, and then on the Blu-ray disc, you have the Element of Terror featurette, Strangers at the Door featurette, deleted scenes, a theatrical trailer, and TV spots. And then disc three, which is the Blu-ray of the unrated version, you have defining moments, writing and directing the Strangers. That's probably the best featurette on this disc, just because it gives you a little bit of insight on how Bertino kind of conceived this film and how it came to be. So, it's always interesting to hear a director talk about how they got the idea for something and how that manifested, and how it, turned into a film. So I would definitely check that one out. That's one I would recommend. All the Right Moves, Kip Weeks on playing the Man in the Mask. So the Man in the Mask is I guess we can say the gang leader of the Strangers, is the guy with the suit and the white mask, who makes an appearance. In fact, I think he's the first one to make an appearance with the mask on. We do see the girl at the beginning. We kind of see her face. It's kind of obscured in shadow. But as far as when they're masked, he is the first one to make an appearance. And then we have Brains and Brawn, Laura Margolis on playing Pinup Girl, which again is another one of the characters of the Intruders, the Strangers. And then we get Deep Cuts, Kevin Gruder on editing the Strangers. So it's a conversation with the editor, and then they have a still gallery. So again, you get the 4K UHD of the unrated version on disc 1. You get the Blu-ray theatrical version on disc 2. And then you have the Blu-ray unrated version on disc 3. And again, all those special features are included. Overall, guys, I would give this release, I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5. Again, for me, it was a necessary upgrade, seeing as I had sold or got rid of that original Blu-ray. If you don't have the Blu-ray, I would recommend picking this up. If you're a fan of the film, if you've seen the film before, especially if you're a collector, it's I think it's a no-brainer to have this in your horror collection. It's a perfect watch for this time of year, especially just because, again, it's got that like low key. There's almost like a fall vibe to it, or like a late summer vibe to it. It's one of those movies that I always feel like I want to watch this time of year. So if you don't have that Blu-ray, this is a no-brainer. If you have the 2018 Blu-ray, it's not necessarily something that you need, at least not day one. If you can wait for a sale, definitely pick it up then. Otherwise, I'd say maybe hold off. Not a game changer. Like I said, it's more of a one of those releases where they went in and made slight tweaks, slight enhancements here and there, but nothing that's a drastic, like a mind-blowing improvement over the 2018 Blue. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. If you're interested, if you own this release, if you've watched it, let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. And like always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. That way, whenever we drop content on the channel, you guys can get notified, and stay tuned for more reviews, more content coming your way. Thanks, guys.